Bears fans, still reflecting on what we saw on another episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Bears ESPN insider Courtney Cronin with us yet again, as always on a Tuesday. Courtney, it's not pretty. It's not pretty, and Bears fans are upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 48 hours after the fallout continues from this loss, and I don't know if it would have dissipated much had the really unfortunate timing of the Aaron Rodgers injury happened on Monday night. We might still be going vitriol at full force from this fan base had that not happened, to take our attention away from it momentarily. But even this morning on September 12th, 2 days after this game, my Twitter mentions are a cesspool.
Yeah,
they want everybody fired.
That's oh my God. I love the NFL season for one reason. Depending on what you do that week, everyone's either fired or you have to give them all raises. So we got to break down what we saw. I mean, listen, we're going to go through pretty much. I've talked about this a couple of times, but the importance of the preparation that preseason gets into. Want to get into that. Rodgers, of course, we got to talk about that. I mean, seeing him go down yesterday after 4 plays was insane. Want to talk about a little bit of an injury, where we at kind of with the injury situation on some of the guys on this team. And of course, listen, somebody's got to get into it. Yurko was on fire the other day. I think Kyle Brandt even was a little bit on fire the other day. Chase Claypool, as somebody who was excited for you coming here and defended you. What the heck's going on? We got to get into all that and more on today's episode of the Chicago Bears podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, drop a bear down and leave a 5-star review. You know what to do. Let's jump into the show. As this first quarter brought to you by the Hard Rock Casino of Northern Indiana. See Sticks on October 13th at Hard Rock Live. Tickets on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. Courtney, the preparation of this team just seemed horrible. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I have called this, I've dubbed the first game a cavalcade of trash. It's pretty much what we saw coming out of that game. And I think the question that's been asked over and over again, and I think this stems further than just the Bears, but because the Bears are our team, we have to, focus on them with it. But how important is the preseason realistically? And how does this team feel the importance of the preseason is realistically now after the debacle that we saw on Sunday?
We heard a lot on Sunday of the hindsight thinking of, man, from a lot of teams, it would have been great had we had our starters play in the preseason, and when teams had the opportunity to do so, they didn't. A lot of that just ends up being what you see in week one, which is a lot of rust. And that's the case every year. Frankly, when we were at a 16-game schedule a couple of years ago, usually you could pencil in like the first quarter of the season, those first 4 games, the first month, more or less, and this is probably going to be no different. Doesn't look great. I mean, yeah, you get a couple good games here and there. What was it a couple years ago? Like Rams Chiefs, that was awesome. That was like one of the few good games you can remember from like the early part of the season. But this is what happens when you have actual opponents to game plan for. So while the preseason excuse is not a throwaway excuse, I don't think it's going to change anybody's thinking for the following season. Like I heard Nick Sirianni say this after beating the Patriots the other day, that he wished he could have gotten his starters some more play in the preseason. He felt they were a little rusty. And, how much of that is rust versus, Bill Belichick had months and months and months to prepare for you, and is one of the greatest defensive minds of NFL history, certainly of this generation, that might have been more at play here than the team not playing Jalen Hurts and all that. And the same thing goes for the Bears. I know what Matt Eberflus said yesterday about the preseason, and is it an excuse? Yeah. Does it have some validity? Sure. Because you go look at a number of different areas. Of course, the offensive line is getting a ton of heat because they were terrible. And frankly, the parts that were the most terrible were the center position and then at right guard. And we know Nate Davis was MIA from a lot of practice during the preseason, and Lucas Patrick was MIA early on, and then, has to play because Cody Whitehair ends up hurting his finger, and then he gets moved over and Lucas is in at center. And, I don't know if I don't really buy it if they would have been any better had they practiced in the preseason, because the level of play you're getting at those positions especially those two that I just pointed out. I don't think anybody's pounding the table saying Lucas Patrick is, a great center. Is he a good backup? Right now, he doesn't even look like that. So if they would have gotten a little bit more time in the preseason, would it have helped? I don't know. It just feels kind of like a convenient excuse, while there is some truth to it, that this unit could have been better had that happened. Of course, we've all seen the screenshot floating around where on one play, I think it was in the second half, 4 of Justin's 5 offensive linemen in front of him are facing him.
Yeah.
That's never a good sign. I don't, preseason or not, that should never happen. But
yeah, I addressed that one on Twitter and all the socials yesterday. I didn't put it on YouTube, but like that play is Justin's pick. Justin had time on that one
because that's a late throw.
Justin,
but I mean, under any other circumstances, something like that happens.
The problem is we saw that 42% of the rest of the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean and I know the offensive line becomes its own conversation at some point, but the idea of them not playing starters in the preseason, will that change going forward? I mean, they were pretty injured throughout, and they were trying to play it safe, which I can understand, but the area outside of the offensive line where that probably affects things the most is the defensive line, because I remember having a conversation with DeMarcus Walker about this after the game. Like, they pressured Love they got 6 pressures on him.
Yep.
They blitzed him 16%, 17% of the time. Like, they could not pressure the quarterback, but let's start up front. That unit has 3 new starters between Ngakoue, Walker, and Andrew Billings. And then there's new personnel with Rasheem Green and then the 2 rookie defensive tackles. That's 6 of 8 players that are brand new to this defense. And could they have benefited from more reps in the preseason? Sure. The only way you get better at football is by practicing football and playing and playing and playing and repping it till you can't rep it again. But that's just never going to be a realistic thing. So we hear that like, oh man, do you wish you would have played more in the preseason? Yeah, come to think of it, that would have been much better. Like, is it going to actually change anything, or is that all lip service? Because I think it's a convenient way to deflect off of the idea that they weren't ready to play, which they maintain that they were. It's just, oh, look, well, sorry, we were ready to play, but look, our starters, they haven't had time to gel, continuity on the offensive line, chemistry with your rush plan. Honestly, that stuff only goes so far as being a valid excuse for the lack of, just the poor play that we saw.
And I think listen, preseason's gonna die. People have training camp is still going to be there. I think you're going to see joint practices, but preseason is going to get to a point where it's all about filling out your last 10 spots on your roster.
It's already been there though. And we've already shortened it by 1 game. Who's to say it doesn't get shortened by another game at some point?
Week 18's coming. I know people want to push back on and NFL player safety and all that. In the NFL, week 18's coming. Mm-hmm. Right? We're going to get to a point where literally we're going to talk about the first 2 games of the season, first 3 games of the season. Like we talk about college football games. Hey, guess what? Nobody's really playing until week 4. Nobody's really in there because there's so many times now where, yes, and I think the Packers did treat this like a rivalry game, but realistically, you're at a point where the Bears basically were like, we're not hits principle. We're not playing anybody, even if they're hustling. If they're hustling intensely, yeah, they came up a little gimpy. Nobody's going to play. Any injury you have, you're out. And so we had, 21 players not playing in preseason at one point? Realistically, that's always going to be a recipe for you to struggle in week 1. I think a lot of Bears fans just thought all the chips were stacked against the Packers. But on the flip side, right, when you look on the other side of that, the Packers did play in preseason. Jordan Love got a ton of reps.
Yep.
Looked like he was a little bit, I'm not to say he looked great, but he looked like he was more prepared for what he was seeing on the other side of him. Whether that goes to preseason or proper planning, though, I think that's the question that really needs to be laid out, because Luke Getsy's game plan, to me, spoke to a Packers team that was here last year, not the defense that it seems like Joe Barry might actually have finally figured out.
When Justin told us on Sunday that, the game plan called for a lot of vertical passes, the screen game,
yeah.
It's there's like, the term double-edged sword. Like think of an object that like every side of it is sharp, not just that one that has 2 sides to it, that has like 10 sides to it, because that's how you have to view like the conundrum here. So if you look at it in this way, okay, Luke Getsy's like, if you want to like fault, like who's to blame, Getsy or Fields? Let's start with Getsy. All right, well, if he dialed up all these screen passes, how come he didn't help his quarterback downfield? If you're looking at it through that lens, you have to ask yourself, what did he think that Fields could do with this game plan? Why was he calling that? Well, they have a very good defensive line. You and I talked about that when we were going through the positions that had the edge. In hindsight, we probably could add a couple more of that. Certainly their running game has the edge, which I know that we had. I think you and I both had that in their D-line and running game, but clearly have the quarterback edge too. But if you're Luke Getsy and you look at this, you're like, okay, Kenny Clark, all these dudes who are really good, they're going to not just hurt and, try to like, hinder Darnell Wright from having a good day. He knows the strength of his offensive line. He knew that was probably going to happen. Get the ball out quick, because you know what? If you don't ask your offensive lineman to block that long because the quarterback's able to drop back and dump off a quick pass, you're helping the offensive line with Fields, which we've been told repeatedly, he can get the ball out more quickly than he did last year. He can, because that's those reads, the hot reads, all things like that requires the quarterback to drop back and know immediately where he's going. And that was supposed to help the offensive line. But when you have a quarterback who, at that point too, he's running for his life. He's getting hit a whole ton. He's holding onto the ball too long. And that play that you and I were just talking about, which was not a screen pass, that was the cover 2 look that he saw, that he was a tad late on that throw that Quay Walker picked off in return for a touchdown. Like, all those things factor into why the game plan failed. It's not just, Luke Getsy called a bunch of screen passes and they went nowhere. That's part of it, but it's not everything, because the blame can be placed equally on Justin Fields as it can the offensive line, as it can some of the receivers not getting to open downfield, as it can on Luke Getsy not giving DJ Moore any opportunity to get involved in the game. But I know that this is going to be talked about a lot. I know the offensive line is a significant issue here in what Luke Getsy can call going forward, because it all starts with protections, because everything has to be timed up so your receivers can get open and you can hit them in stride. Like, that's a problem. But to me, the bigger problem is this defensive line, and it's a scheme thing. I know that these guys talked about not playing together in the preseason, but I looked back at the film. I did a rewatch this morning, and I thought back to, this cover 2 scheme that they run. If you want to pressure the quarterback, you got to have some dogs up front.
Yeah.
When Alan Williams was in Minnesota and he was running this, I think that this is just kind of like dedication and maybe a lack of wanting to change. Like when he was in Minnesota in 2012, 2013, when he was in DC there and he's running this, you know what his defensive line was? Jared Allen, Kevin Williams, Brian Robinson, Chad Greenway was on this team. Like, you had some dogs up front. You had people who could actually get after the passer. You had a better caliber of athlete and better caliber of player. And that's no knock on what you have up front, but you don't have that now. You are not adjusting your scheme to the personnel. You're saying, we made this work elsewhere, we can make it work here. It is hard as hell to get pressure with a traditional 4 down front, like 4 down lineman. It is so hard to do that unless you have superstar pass rushers, guys who don't need the help of other positions to generate pressure. The Bears do not have that, yet this is the same thing that they've been trying to force through now for more than a year, realizing that, yes, the personnel has changed, but it really hasn't changed that much to where this scheme is applicable, because it's predictable and it's frankly not working with this group that they have.
I see. The only thing I would push back on, right, is Yannick is supposed to be. that superstar pass rusher, and he has been in his career.
Mhm.
Now, you got to me, the issue that I have with how Alan Williams drew things up is that there was nothing that helped Yannick. The one time where I really looked at and you saw him kind of do something a little bit different was the one sack that they got on Jordan Love, where Yannick Ngakoue comes back out, gets around, and is able to make a play and lays into Jordan Love. Like, I looked at, when I looked at this tape, and it's so funny to me, every time they did the one thing that all Bears fans this week are going, why didn't they do that more? Positive things happen. You get the sack. I wanted to see the linebackers coming downhill a little bit more. The few times that they did that, Tremaine Edmonds looks like a superstar. He's in the backfield killing somebody's running back, right? The one time that, or one of the 4 times that they decide to throw the football more than 10 yards forward, you complete 3 of them, and one goes for a touchdown to Darnell Mooney, right? Like, it's just like, hey, you guys saw this. You need to adjust your plan, and we'll get more into the scheme too, the scheme of things, and kind of what we wanted to see more on the scheme side. But it's just one of those things where it was like you said, they were so locked in. And I swear that they prepared for the Packers team that we had saw last season. And that's the one concern that I do have right now with the coaching staff moving forward. Listen, it's week 1. Week 1 by week 16 usually means nothing. 2 of the teams that were in the title games last year lost week 1. I'm not saying the Bears are going to be there, but like we see that. But it's one of those things where the mindset that your coaches came into this game with, to me, while the players were very unprepared, your coaches were the most unprepared people that I saw on that field the other day. And they had nothing to do, or they had no way to adjust to what the Packers brought.
Yeah, and that's, like, is it coaching malpractice to not adjust? I mean, what did the Packers do in the second half? They got Aaron Jones involved. I mean, Jordan Love in the first half at one point had a sub 50% completion percentage, and he was overthrowing guys. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, I mean, he's got a very strong arm, but once they made the adjustment to bring Aaron Jones into the passing game, that screen that went for, 40 plus yards, like, that's the stuff that the Bears didn't have a counter to. And that's unfortunate for them, because the Packers looked like they had outclassed and outcoached the other coaching staff in Chicago. Yeah. And they didn't have an answer for it.
Yeah, that's a concern. That's a concern. Let's head into the second quarter. We're going to get more into the scheme, and also want to talk about Justin Fields dropping an apology to Bears fans. What do we think about that? But first, I do want to talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation that happened with the Jets. I know that's a taboo name to bring to this podcast because of what he's done to us. But one of 2 things here. One, for me, seeing Rodgers go down, I need people to understand this. As a Bears fan, I've grown up. I've seen nothing but Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. I hate Aaron Rodgers. I felt bad for Aaron Rodgers. Some of the stuff that I saw yesterday on Twitter from Packers fans who he brought a Super Bowl and multiple MVPs is an absolute joke. Like, you might as well be Raptors fans at that point with how cheering on an injury is crazy to me. But
I mean, honestly,
that's insane.
Like, the stuff that I was seeing from, like, the Green Bay side of things, like, and these are fans. Obviously, fans are emotional. Fans have volatile responses to things of, man, now we're only going to get a second-round pick versus the conditional second was supposed to turn into a first, because we had thought he was going to play more than 60% of snaps. No one thought he was going to rupture his Achilles on the 4th play of the freaking game. Yeah. Like, come on, guys, like, and gals, just stop. It drives me nuts, because you should never want to see that happen. And I know that the Jets hype has been forced down our throats for months. We have been told by the NFL, they paid for, Hard Knocks. They did all stuff. They told us, consume this. This is part of of the fabric of the 2023 season, because Aaron Rodgers, creates them a lot of money, and he drives the headlines. And I can understand some Bears fan, not Bears fan, I can understand, like, any fan that's not a Jets fan getting upset about that and saying, to hell with the Jets. Like, I don't want to pay attention to this. But Aaron Rodgers, I feel for him in this moment. More just, obviously a situation like that is brutal. But, like, you saw the best version. Like, take your emotion aside, like, out of it from being a Bears fan. You saw the best version of Aaron Rodgers, where he was locked in, where he was ready to go, that this team that was built around him, the Jets might finally be able to do something, 12-year playoff drought, all of that. And then to watch him get carted off. And then, in that moment, like when he's got the walking boot on and he gets on the cart to go back to the locker room or to get the x-ray at that point.
I thought it was a high ankle till then.
Yeah, I did too. But then watching it back, like I was like, okay, you see the pop and that messed me up watching that.
It sucks, man. And it's one of those things for me where that's probably, unless he just fights his way back, that's probably the last we see of Aaron Rodgers.
And that's honestly, like, that was a sobering moment to realize he's going to be 40 years old next year.
Yeah.
Or I think December is his birthday. Does he want to go through an Achilles rehab? Oh my God, it's like when that thing snaps, your leg kind of the muscle behind the calf. Remember, this is the same calf that he injured. Yeah. From my understanding, it kind of becomes an accordion, and like the way that that's why they stabilize it in the boot. It basically kind of like just gives you something that you can walk because the thing is floating around back there. They have to reattach it to the bone to go through that surgery. And then to come back, like this could change the landscape of the NFL. And I know that sounds like a pretty significant thing to say, but I really believe that because we know that Aaron Rodgers in the NFL, like the NFL is better with him in it. And we haven't seen the NFL without Aaron Rodgers in it since before he really started playing, the late 2000s. And it's just a weird feeling that all of that, like it will be one of if he retires, decides he can't do it anymore. Like, can you imagine the 30 for 30 on that? It's gonna start with that scene of him coming out with the flag last night, which was such a cool intro, and it's gonna end with him it's gonna quickly cut to him on the cart. Like, it gives you goosebumps thinking about the fragility of this game. And I know there's been a lot brought into the turf, and of course the turf sucks. Soccer players just have a better union than the NFLPA because it's such a like they won't put up with this shit of playing on turf. That's the reason that when the World Cup comes here, like all these stadiums are getting turf out and bringing grass in.
Yeah.
Like how the problem is, and this is my old existential thing. The problem is when the NFLPA, kind of basically accepted injuries are part of the game instead of injury prevention. Yeah. That's what brought us to this point where we have a situation like this. And it's like, there were ways to prevent this. And I'm not saying that this couldn't have happened on grass either. He already had a calf injury but nothing happened. He didn't miss time because of it. It's just unfortunate. Like if it was Aaron Rodgers, if it was Patrick Mahomes, if it was DeMar Hamlin, like you don't want to see catastrophic injury situations take a player away from playing the game because that just brings your football mortality like this far from your face. And it sucks because the game is better when great players are playing in it. And the game is better when those great players are irritating another franchise because their greatness is something that another franchise can't top. Like this is good for the fabric of the sport. Him not in football, like I can't even bring myself to think about like what that's like just yet because it feels like it's just whiplash. You were preparing for the season where the Jets were going to be relevant and potentially win the AFC East, and then all of a sudden you blink and the guy is gone.
It reminds you that the NFL is a violent sport. Lance said this yesterday. And at the snap of a finger, it can be gone. It really puts you in the mindset of, okay, this is what the players think. This is why the players do the things that they do the way that they do. This is why Chris Jones holds out for the contract that he wants to get. This is why Brian Burns holds in, right? Like this is why guys do this because in a snap of in an instant, it can all be gone. Right now, Aaron Rodgers' career might be over. And for me, it's just like thinking of it from the aspect of if somebody takes your dream away in a second. This is a dream moment for Aaron Rodgers, proving that he was going to take another franchise to the Super Bowl, finally being free of whatever he felt was oppressing him in Green Bay, and being able to go out there with the team that had everything ready-made and go out there and do the things that Tom Brady did.
Yeah.
Guess what? Everybody's not Tom Brady. It sucks at the end of the day, but the biggest thing that I took away from yesterday is the NFL is an absolute machine, and you just saw everybody go, okay, move on.
Move on. Yep. I mean, the next man up thing with Zach Wilson, apparently that's going to be the guy they're rolling with. And I know that they've, they said they've made some calls, or like the reports say they've made some calls to some quarterbacks. They need more quarterback. They need another veteran in there because Tim Boyle, I think, is on the practice squad. But this will be a big moment to see, because they tailored that offense to Aaron Rodgers. Now they've got to tailor it back to Zach Wilson. Can they capitalize off of the changes that they made this offseason and capitalize on this defense that's really freaking good, and just, lean on the areas you can lean on and hopefully get by at quarterback, because they built this team for Aaron Rodgers. Like they really did, from the play caller down to, bringing all his guys in from Green Bay. The fact that he's not going to be playing this year, it's a gut punch. And it's honestly so unfortunate that it came to this. And I was hoping high ankle sprain, because that's a couple weeks. You can get tightrope surgery, like even a broken foot. I know there are a lot of Twitter doctors out there. Broken ankle, whatever it could have been, would have been better than Achilles. Like, think about how long it took Kevin Durant to come back from his, and he has not been the same player since, for a multitude of reasons. But like injury wise, it set his career back too. It's such an unfortunate injury. It's
one of those injuries that, like, that's the one that starts you down that path, right? Like, realistically, I think the worst we've seen Aaron Rodgers have was he had a broken leg, right?
Yeah, the broken collarbone that knocked him out at 17.
But it's not one of those where it's like, okay, this is a ligament. This is something that like I feel like these are the injuries where it starts to send you down the, if you try to come back, it's not going to go the way that you think.
And not many people do that at 40 years old.
You know what I mean? Kevin Durant was
33
when that happened. And he's come back, and he's still elite. But even with a Kevin Durant, right? We've seen him have injury issues every single year. Outside of that, your body has to compensate for what once was there that is not the same. So I wish the best for Rodgers. I know that sounds crazy coming from a Bears fan, but this is not just there's a human element, and I've done that a ton this week, right? Like when I'm standing next to J-Mac, when I'm standing next to Lance Briggs, these guys are people at the end of the day. And there's a human element that comes in. No matter what I think of him as a player, he's elite. He kicked the crap out of my team for 20 years, basically. But I don't want to see him go out like that. Let's get back on some Bears. That's a tough one to segue from. Let's jump into the third quarter here, though, because, listen, we got to finish this out. Or jump into, I thought the scheme conversation was really good. What adjustments realistically is this team planning on making? Because the one thing that I heard from Matt Eberflus Monday after the game is that, we fixed it. That's the wildest thing to hear on a Monday after the game when you haven't done anything yet. Yeah, we got in the room. We saw the things that we had going on.
Yeah, all good. Everything's fine. We know exactly what we did wrong. I mean, hindsight's 2020, but that's Jalen Johnson echoed it. Like, we came, because everything, when you can point it out and be like, oh, okay, yeah, I see what I did wrong here. Got it. Storing it in my mental bank. Like, they're always going to say that, but I do, I thought back to what Flus said on Cap and I'm going to try to pull it up here. So I was really impressed by the way that like Cap kept pushing him on the DJ Moore thing, because you talk scheme adjustments. Like, I'm sorry. I know that Justin was making a ton of sense when he said, when you're in 3rd and 15 or like 2nd and 20 because of all these penalties, but also like, some of those 2nd and long, 3rd and long things were brought up because they struggled to move the ball, penalty or not. Like, it shrinks your playbook. But it brought me back to a place when I covered Minnesota, and Kirk Cousins, like Justin Fields, is a risk-averse quarterback. I know that Lance has talked about that. We talked about it on the pregame show on Sunday. And Kirk, for the early part of his career, granted under a different offense, before Kevin O'Connell got there, like, he wouldn't throw the ball and just trust that Justin Jefferson would go get it. And eventually, he gets into that mode. The scheme helps. Obviously, when there's play action, they're rolling away from pressure, and he can, do the things he does with bootlegs. Like, that's, but I say this to say, sometimes you got to force the ball to your best player, and you have to have plays. Like, and look at what happened last year with Justin Jefferson, winning offensive player of the year because of what the game plan called for Kirk to target his best receiver. Look at Josh Allen last night, Pat. Like, what was he doing in the fourth quarter? He was looking for digs. He was looking for digs again and again and again and again.
Now, Josh Allen's a little different because if it's a 5-yard pass or a 40-yard pass, he's throwing a full-on Kamehameha wave no matter what. Like that, I was watching him, like, Jesus.
Like, and I, there's a lot wrong with what happened in Buffalo last night, but it doesn't take away from the fact that when your best player's on the field with you, target him. I don't want to hear nobody wants to hear the excuse of, oh, well, all these other factors like factored into why DJ had 2 targets. That cannot be. That's one of the biggest red flags that I wrote about this today at ESPN.com. It's one of the biggest red flags that came away from answers yesterday. And what he said in the press conference, I thought was one thing, but I really, when Pat pushed him on, like, okay, like, what's the rationale behind the lack of targets? And, the Jair Alexander thing, because he said he thought it was some things that Green Bay did. Yeah, of course. But DJ Moore is a great receiver. He's going to face your opponent's best cornerback. What's next? Like, what's your next excuse you're going to use?
If I'm not mistaken, didn't he put up 131 yards on Jair Alexander?
Yeah, he had a history there, like all that stuff. But like it said, he said, we have our opportunities. We just didn't seize these opportunities. We're going to obviously target him and put him in position. He's one of the best players on our roster. So then Cap followed up, who's most responsible for that? Is it Fields' execution or the plan? He said he thinks both of those. And it kind of danced around this answer. But like when he's talking about like taking shots downfield, like that you have to take shots downfield. And then yesterday, like that was, after he makes those comments, Cap and Jay about it during his press conference. I thought that really important stuff when you have Justin Fields unable to like scan the field properly and make reads. That's something like he's got to be keeping his eyes downfield. That's what Eberflus was talking about. And of course, that feeds into like the not speculation, but just more the, okay, is this same old? He's looking down at the rush. He is reverting to tuck and run habits out of necessity, but also out of what he knows and what a habit he can't break. Because of course there were times that called for that would have taken away those opportunities for DJ Moore downfield. But when you have 4 passes that go 10 plus yards, there's something fundamentally wrong with what you're dialing up. And last I checked, DJ Moore took those 2 targets for 25 yards. Then all of a sudden, when they're almost in the red zone, he's out of the game. He goes to the sideline for a play. We never really got clarity on that. So it was bizarre. It was baffling to me. It's baffling to anybody who watched. And that's got to be like thing number 1 that Luke Getsy has to figure out this week.
Yeah, and I think the part that was most interesting to me is that, right, of course, listen, I get it. There's times where guys on the other side of the field are going to make it tough to get the ball to a guy. But when we're talking about your top wide receivers in the league, who are we talking about that doesn't get double teamed? I think me and you both agree. DJ Moore, probably 16th best receiver, right outside that top 20, right? But when you look at a Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra, DK, Garrett Wilson had Zach Wilson in the game and they were double teaming Garrett Wilson at times. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Evans. Like, hey, guess what? They double team guys. I don't know if like this is a confusing concept for coaches, but like players get double teamed. Now that also goes to, like you said, with Justin Fields, you got to be willing to pull the trigger on those shots. But I can't kill you for not taking a ton of shots downfield when it seemed like, and Justin corroborated this, right, where the offensive game plan was east and west. We're going to throw it to the right. We're going to throw it to the left. We're going to keep things short, keep them close to the line of scrimmage. Even when you were throwing it forward, right, it's because you're in shotgun. You're already so far back. It's still behind the line of scrimmage. Everybody has fault in this. I'm not taking fault off of Justin Fields. There was a couple of times where I saw, right, Darnell Mooney coming across. You got to pull the trigger on that. DJ Moore downfield, you got to pull the trigger on that. Those are the things that we saw in practice that you were willing to pull the trigger on that you're not willing to do now. Mm-hmm. But I swear we didn't see this many screen passes in training camp the entire time.
We saw a lot of them. And I remember there were moments where it's like, okay, this is a good fail safe because they didn't have this element. They were one of the worst wide receiver screen teams last year. They didn't throw a lot of screens to the running backs. They didn't get the running backs involved in the pass game really until like later on in the season. We knew that it was something they wanted to work on. And I remember early on, like even like in late like July, early August, we start seeing it. Okay, it's popping up more. It's popping up more. It felt at times like it was becoming their offensive identity. That cannot be how you win football games, just like checking down. Like I get why they were doing it, because they wanted Fields to not take a sack for like a 10-yard loss and all of these things that had happened last year. They want to protect the quarterback. They want to, don't be a hero. Check the ball down. Like if the play is not there, check it down, because it's a safer play to do that than any of the other options. But even with the deep ball game, like there were moments where like he's missing guys downfield on deep balls. And we've heard like how good of a deep ball passer the Bears think he is. And there were moments where it worked and where it didn't. But to see none of that in this game, more or less, like outside of a couple of plays, the longest play they had last on Sunday was a 26-yard run from Roschon Johnson. Second longest play, or third longest play, was that 20-yard touchdown by Darnell Mooney. Like, and that to me was such a bizarre way to go into this. And then for Fields to say, well, that was the game plan. I understand why. I understand that that should tell you, like that comment right there tells you everything you need to know. The Bears do not trust this offensive line. They do not think this offensive line is very good, because if you're calling for a ton of screens, it's because it doesn't require the offensive line to block that long, because you're worried about what happens if they have to block for 4-5 seconds, which of course is a very long time, but they want the extended time away, get the quarterback to throw the ball quickly, because that it's the whole chicken and egg argument. Like, what are you more stressed about? What comes first in the equation? Is it the pass protection or is it the quarterback? And I frankly think it's all up on the offensive line. They do not trust that unit because of a number of different things. We could bring this full circle and say, oh, it's because they didn't play in the preseason. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I don't know if this offensive line is very good. I really don't, because at this rate, Fields is going to be hurt by midway point in the season. You hope it doesn't happen, but if he's taking hits like that, if he's running for his life, we saw this happen last year in Atlanta. Like, this is not a situation that you feel good about if you're the Bears, because this pass protection doesn't look any better than it did a year ago. It just doesn't.
What we saw in the second half on Sunday was more alarming to me than the first half on Sunday by far. I get it, the feeling out process, all of that. But what we saw in the second half on Sunday, coaching wise, was to me similar, if not the same to, with less sacks, what we saw from Matt Nagy versus Cleveland. Just an unwillingness to change what you had. The offensive line didn't look good in the first half. So, okay, what are we going to do in the second half to try and make things better? Hey, you went out there and picked up extra tight ends that are pretty good at blocking, right? Like you can go max protect. Maybe there's something you can do to help this offensive line in the slightest.
Yes. I will say the Tunyon injury. Maybe he shouldn't have. That one was a little strange. He was in there for 4 snaps, and then we know he got downgraded on Saturday to questionable with a back injury. I think that plays into it. I love all the people now coming out about EQ of, wow, he was such a great run blocker. Why didn't they have him active? These are the same people who said he should have been cut. And, that is an interesting choice. And I would love to, that one might come up if they run into the same issues where there's a blocking problem. Because, in not just the pass game, but this was a rushing team last year that was the best in the NFL. Of course, the quarterback played a huge role in that, but they did not look good running the ball. Take the garbage time stuff out of it with Roschon Johnson. They did not look good running the ball either. They weren't very efficient. And that's concerning too.
I think we saw, remember, me and you have both talked about Roschon becoming a part of this. You see Justin Fields roll out left on the boot. I don't know who was supposed to be blocking, but it did not work. He gets sacked. All of a sudden, Roschon's a 3-down back. And the very next play, right, Roschon does a chip, gets out in the flat, gives Justin a couple extra seconds, gets the ball, moving it downfield. Roshan Johnson's going to be the starting running back on this team. Like this.
Yeah. Oh, eventually. I mean, the idea, like if you look at just like the splits and like when he was in the game and seeing how he handled pass protection, yeah, there's a blitz pickup that he looked. This is why they drafted him. Sort of look like he's going to be utilized a lot more than he was on Sunday. 29 snaps. But we all saw this coming. All of us who have been looking at this guy.
I didn't think third quarter.
I mean, how bad did it need to get before they ended up doing that? I thought it was shoot. Like I would have thought like earlier in the game because of how poor they were moving the ball through the run game too.
Yeah, the second you saw Khalil Mack, it's also to the strengths though. I will say this. I think that's the other thing that irritates me, right? You're in the 4th and 1 situation, and you got a 6'1" running back there. You're trying to run Khalil Herbert up the middle when clearly he's a speed back. He's better to the outside. I keep coming back to this, and it's not absolving the players. The players have to make plays no matter what. Guess what? Jordan Love has some plays that didn't look good, but he made them, right? The tight end, like that starts with a fumble. Everybody's like, oh, snap, what's happening? Oh, I got a guy wide open downfield, drops it in. Like you've just got to sometimes go out there and make plays. But the scheme to set this team up just seemed conservative. It seemed inept. It seemed like they weren't ready for the team that they saw on the field. And I think that kind of goes into what Justin Fields says in the press conference after, right? We hear Justin Fields come out and basically say, listen, I'm sorry, Bears fans. I'm sorry to everybody that came out. Sorry to my teammates, kind of taking the blame, taking the shot. But realistically, right, this is a collective apology that's needed from the Chicago Bears overall.
Yeah. I mean, there's not just like one part of the team that carries blame. Like when you walk away from a game of 3 bright spots, maybe 2.5, because Yannick Ngakoue looked good, but then he just disappeared. And some of that is snap count, because what you have to, like, that's something with Alan Williams too. Like you got to have guys. This is just like going back to like that Minnesota thing I brought up, players who can make sure that they're not, kind of conserving their energy. Guys who have to like play, who are not going to go all out every single snap. You have to have smart players who can do that. Not saying these guys are not that, but it's a strategy thing versus, and these are new guys. So I think he's still working out like his, his rotation and the snap counts for each guys in games of how we can utilize players who might have that extra gear that they've been holding back. And, granted, when you get your ass kicked from like the beginning, it's tough to like, it's tough. It's tough. But like Ngakoue was good for the first half. I will say that the only other bright spots on this team were Roshan Johnson and Cairo Santos. So like, if that's the case, then everybody, not just Justin Fields, needs to be. And I mean, I don't know how you feel about the apology thing. Like some people like it. Some people think it's stupid, but if we're going to be apologizing, you might as well have everybody doing it at that point, not just the quarterback.
Here's my thing with any apology, right? Fine. You're apologizing. I love it. Cool. Thank you for thinking about us, the Bears fan. But you know what? I don't believe in. Don't apologize and then replay the act, right? That's the number one thing with an apology. If I punch you in the face and then say, my bad, and then I punch you in the face again, guess what? You're not going to think the apology is serious. Guess what? You punched Bears fans in the face, basically. You came out and apologized. Don't go out there and punch us in the face again, because there's a lot of – and here's the thing. We, the fan base, believed based on what the Bears told us. That's why this game sucks so much. It has nothing to do with what we were thinking. We were ready to come into the season a little bit calmer, and I think a lot of people did, right? Like, 9-8, but I can see, listen, I look on this schedule, I can find 10, I can find 11, 8 and 9. But no, Justin Jones, we're going at him. I'm sick of this. It's finally time for us to take over. Justin Fields, we're all good. We ready. It's because of what y'all said that gets us hyped. Jaquan Brisker going in. I hate the Packers. The wackest I hate the Packers of all time. We'll talk about him as well. But like, listen, if you didn't really think of this as a rivalry game, like the Green Bay Packers clearly did, because Jordan Love came in here to rip your hearts out and did it, then don't sit here and hype it up like it's going to be that, because now that's where I'm looking at the rest of Bears fans and I get I get why you think that it's all over. I get why you think it's the end of the world, because the same things that have happened to us our entire life are happening here again against the team that, no matter what, on paper, we should have beat them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know that this is one loss and that's how they view it, and they're right, but like then that puts the pressure on the next game to be must win, because they go into Kansas City down 0-2 and they lose that game. They're coming back to play Denver 0-3. Like that's 14 straight losses.
Yeah.
But that's dating back to last October. That's demoralizing.
And this is the best time to get I'm not going to lie to you. Listen, the Chiefs, maybe they have it figured out by week 3. Maybe they don't. They're working in Chris Jones.
I think they'll have it figured out. They'll have it figured out as early as this week.
I believe in Andy Reid more than I believe in what we have here. But early in the season is the time where you kind of get teams where they're like, we're still trying to work through these kinks. With Denver, I mean, Denver looks like a kink. Like, I don't know what the heck is happening there. At least in week 1, it was like, oh, no, this still kind of looks like the same. Like, okay, Russell Wilson looked a little better, but like it didn't look like Sean Payton came in there and just magically fixed everything like I think a lot of us were expecting. So as there's opportunity here for the Bears early in the season. You lost one that you should have got. Oftentimes you will win one that you shouldn't have won. We did that last season with the Patriots. We shouldn't have won that Patriots game. We end up dominating that game. You got to find a way to go out there and win one that you shouldn't have won to make up for this one, even though technically you need to.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of issues to get to. Let's jump into this fourth quarter here, because the biggest issue for me is somebody that I was excited that the Bears brought over, somebody that I defended when the Bears brought him over, somebody who literally, no matter what we're seeing on the field right now, actually does have all the talent in the world, and it's got to be something between the ears. Chase Claypool just doesn't care. I don't. There's one of two camps out there right now. Claypool was pissed off by the scheme that was put in place, and so he didn't want to go out there and run it, which is terrible to be in. Or this guy just doesn't care that he's here right now, and he's trying to play bad to basically not get a contract offer here. I don't know.
When they hand out loafs among their grades, I'm curious how many, and we'll never know, but I'm curious how many Chase Claypool will have gotten, because the film that's going around, you can find it on Twitter. People have pointed it out. It's not a good look for somebody. He's, jogging on routes, not finishing blocks. I mean, the Mooney play where he gets, that 5-foot dude that they have for Green Bay, just mauls him because he fights through a block with Claypool that was like a quasi. I mean, it's just not a good look. And for somebody who is in such a prove it year, and I mean, Ryan Poles is going to have to banking on Chase Claypool to get it right, so it doesn't make him look like he's made another another mistake that he's going to have to move on from.
I want to ask you this because we haven't gotten to see it, and maybe this is shooting him some slight bail, which he doesn't deserve at all. How did he look in practice? Did he look like he was full go? Did he look like he was full speed, or did he look like the hamstring injury was still nagging at him?
No, it did not. It did not look like that at all, and they have maintained that since he got back 2 weeks, 2.5, 3 weeks ago now, that he's been fine. So that's not even an excuse. It's not even an excuse that's applicable.
That's because his performance, I mean, it just had, I don't care, right? And he's the main one. And I think that's the biggest concern here, because offensively, we saw it at training camp when the defense was doing a lot of chirping. Chase was the one that was firing up the offense. He was the one that was out there yelling back at DBs and getting intense. And they said, hey, we actually got to calm him down sometimes. Mm-hmm. Your two other guys that are your main guys, and Justin Fields and DJ Moore, they're just like, hey, we're going to go out here, we're going to play, we're going to make plays, we're going to win the game. They're not the excitable guys. And according to J-Mac, right, you didn't have anybody on the sideline who was without Chase Claypool out there screaming and yelling.
Yeah, I will be very curious to see, if that happens again.
Are we at a cut your losses point with him?
No, they can't. They won't. They will not. There's no way that they can do that. The fallout from something like that, does it send a message to the locker room? I know what Yurko said. I understand the intensity of what a move like that would do, but they gave up basically a first-round pick for this guy, a pick that became number 32. They cannot. But if he becomes an offensive liability and this becomes a trend, that's a different conversation. But this cannot be something that is more than a week one, and there's no excuse for it, but it has to stop at week one, because when he was targeted twice, and whether he was irritated about that and the ball not coming his way and that reflected, the tape's there. People see your body language. People see the lack of hustle, the less that's not the hits principle at all. That's like the anti-hits principle. So, and to your question about the hamstring, like there's no way because they've been then it's all BS. If we get these, oh man, my hamstring was acting up, then A, why weren't you on the injury report? And B, for the last 2 weeks, everything's apparently been fine. You've looked just as good as you did when you came back, or when you were there during training camp up until the point you got injured, and we hear you come back and you look just like it. Like it does not hold weight whatsoever.
I mean, I think that game was one of those games where at the end of the season, none of this can matter. But right now it feels like everything's the biggest thing in the world. And I think, right, like even hearing Jaquan Brisker go out there and say that he wishes that the fans had their back more in that second half. I guess you said that's kind of when the boo birds started to come out against them, and maybe don't boo them so early. Chicago's a city that is built on effort. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I talked with Lance Briggs yesterday on the podcast. Lance Briggs is probably the king of hustling to make a play on this on a recent Chicago Bears defense. He had the talent. He had all of that, but the hustle, he was running nonstop. Mm-hmm. He said the effort on the defensive side of the football didn't exist in the second.
No, he's obviously he would know, but I think anybody watching that could see.
Oh, I saw it on TV for sure. Like I'm sitting there watching it on the TV, and I'm like, the team that came out in the second half, which is such a surprise defensively because of how
they were in training camp
The defense came out in the second half like they didn't finish things off with Yannick Ngakoue coming out with a big sack.
Yeah.
Like I don't understand the mentality, and I don't get it from Brisker. Like I don't feel this is a city where you're gonna hear it. You don't get to choose when we're happy for you and when we're not. Guess what? If we saw effort the entire time, and I get it, it was on an offensive play where you see more of the same, but we're tired of seeing the same. This game looked like the same things we've been seeing since Matt Nagy year 2.
Yeah, and it's not this game inspired no confidence that they are moving in the right direction. Of course, you reserve the right to change your opinion if you see a different looking team in Tampa week 2, but that's a big if at this point, because this is just not like it's just not a good look.
I'm going based off of what we saw last season. I wouldn't be surprised if they go down to Tampa and kick the crap out of Tampa, because we saw the Bears make adjustments with no talent last season. Mm-hmm. I think that's the part that irritates Bears fans as well. Why is it now that we have more talent, we're not adjusting at all? When you had less talent, it was like, hey, we got to make a million adjustments in every game because that's all the options we have.
Yeah. Not a great look, but I mean, hey, if they win this week, that changes the conversation. They're right back in it 1-1, and they go to Kansas City, and the hype train for some people will be right back on.
What is the biggest change that you expect? Let's finish it off here. Biggest change you expect from week 1 to week 2 to
DJ Moore. DJ Moore is number 1 for me, because I don't know if this pass rush is going to change. Like I really don't. I think that of course that needs to come into the equation, but it's got to be DJ Moore. You have to get him involved, force the ball to him if you have to. Like that, you did not make this trade for him to be a decoy out there.
When we're talking about the politics of the game, is that going to be relevant, or are they just going to finally let Roschon be the number 1? Because he looked like the best back.
He's trending in that direction. Would it surprise me? No, but I think it might take a couple more weeks before they're willing to the snap counts tell you everything you need to know. Who's on the field in critical 3rd and 4th down situations. That tells you everything you need to know.
It's politics at this point. Like it's just making Khalil Herbert feel good about himself because he did nothing on the field to say you're the starting running back. But I mean, there's a lot to blame on this offense. Courtney, we appreciate you coming on for another episode of the podcast as always. Any nugget that you want to leave the audience with that may leave them feeling better heading into Tampa?
Well, I was going to say, we're going to find out a little bit more about Kyler Gordon's hand injury. So hopefully on Wednesday that comes out, but just kind of, it's not going to make people feel better, but just kind of judging off of the the sentiment that we heard yesterday, it sounds like it might be something that keeps him out a little bit.
It can't be. I mean, I don't know. You need a lot of hand fighting for that position, but is it something that maybe could be a club put on? Or
that's a great question. I guess we'll find that out. But I know that Josh Blackwell would, if he ends up having to be in that situation, if he ends up having to fill in for Gordon, he's done it before. But again, that doesn't inspire a whole ton of confidence in that back end.
I feel you on that. I'm not inspired at all. Hey, follow us on everything at ESPN Chicago. And of course, you can follow me on everything at Path the Designer. Courtney at Courtney Cronin. Bears fans, we got a long way to go, but it's only week 1. Hopefully things continue to turn around. We'll be back tomorrow. J-Mac on the show. Y'all stay in tune with us, man. Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. Bear down. Peace.